Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. What does a city do to reinvent itself decades after having a manufacturing economic base? They double down into healthcare, a fast-growing sector that even robotics and artificial intelligence will struggle to replace, and lifting real estate along with it. Today on Get Rich Education.
Are you looking for a roadmap to financial freedom? If so, we have a solution for you. Norada Real Estate is offering a limited number of free strategy sessions to help you get out of the rat race. Learn how you can create wealth and build monthly passive income. To set up a time with one of our knowledgeable investment counselors, simply go to noradarealestate.com. That's NORADA realestate.com.
For an income property investor like you that needs an income property loan, go to Ridge Lending Group. And over the years, you've heard owner Chaley Ridge generously give her time to you right here on the show as a guest. Ridge provides investment property loans in almost every U.S. state, and you're going to find out how they've helped more Americans realize their dreams of financial freedom through real estate than any other mortgage lender in the entire nation when you get started at ridgelendinggroup.com. Get Rich Education is brought to you by Ridge Lending Group, Producers Wealth, Norada Real Estate, and Total Control Financial.
You're listening to the show that has created more passive income for people than nearly any show in the world. This is the powerful Get Rich Education.
Welcome in. This is Get Rich Education, episode 205. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Before we discuss real estate and properties and markets today, first I want to talk to you about money and currency. Money serves three purposes. First of all, it is a medium of exchange. Secondly, it is a unit of account. And thirdly, it is a store of value. Let's break down these three. First, as a medium of exchange, that just means that money is an object that is generally accepted as a form of payment. Secondly, as a unit of account, it means that money is a way to keep track of how much something is worth. Then thirdly, the store of value. To act as a store of value, money must be reliably saved, stored, and then retrieved, and it must be predictably usable as a medium of exchange when it is retrieved. Additionally, the value of money must remain stable over time. That's part of the store of value. Well, then a currency like the dollar is not money. It doesn't quite pass the third test. A dollar isn't a store of value because if you store dollars, its value only reliably erodes. A dollar is really just fiat money. Fiat, F-I-A-T. Fiat money is paper that is given value because those who use it believe that it has value. The value is not derived from any inherent characteristic. That's fiat money. The value of our dollar is reinforced by faith. It used to be tied to gold, but no longer. Fiat currencies do not store value. Their value is eroded. Well, then what do you do about this erosion? It keeps eroding both your equity and your debt. That's what inflation does. It erodes both your equity and your debt. Well, then what do you do with your dollar? Well, you buy real assets like gold or real estate or a tractor or a giant tank that stores water. They're all real assets. Well, what do a lot of real estate investors do? They have some excess dollars, so then they buy a property, they hope it runs up in value over time, and then they sell and hope that they can get back to more dollars. So that is their investing round trip. They went from cash to assets to cash. As cash continues to be gradually debased, savvy real asset investors instead think about their investing round trip as assets to cash to assets, meaning that you want to spend your time largely in assets. You're using cash as the short-term hinge in between in, say, a 1031 exchange when you're trading up from a smaller asset into a larger one. So instead of most mindsets where you take the round trip from cash to assets to cash, rather, I want you to think about yourself as going from assets briefly to cash, then back to assets. It's actually interesting that I bring this up because I first heard some version of this investing round trip articulated by Russell Gray of the Real Estate Guys radio show. And the Real Estate Guys are who introduced me to today's guest. Now, let's talk about what makes a good real estate asset to invest in for both long-term stable value growth, or really it's price growth, if you listen to last week's show. Macroeconomically and geopolitically, if it is too desirable for people to live in a place, if the panoramic views are too dramatic, or the beach is too warm and sandy, or the concentration of economic power is too great all in one place, then what happens in a metro region is that both domestic money and foreign money rush into that place, and they run up the price so dramatically in a region that rent incomes just don't keep up proportionally to those higher prices, and you as an investor would have to hemorrhage cash flow every month just to hold on to an asset there. We avoid doing that here. In fact, just look at the star cities globally in the banking and finance industry. It's where the numbers generally make 0 sense for you. New York, London, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Singapore, Shanghai, Toronto, Sydney, Zurich, no sense. Turning domestically, let's look at the music industry. The star cities of the music industry are New York, Los Angeles, Nashville. The star cities for show business are New York and Hollywood. New York for the stage, Hollywood for movies and TV. Well, many of the places that I just mentioned are coastal cities. Coastal markets are generally more desirable to live in, and too much wealth on the coasts often drives up the overall market so that it is out of reach for profitability. Well, where are the stars of cash flowing real estate investing? What are the star cities? And this is what makes them quite different because they're inland. They might include cities that some would say have less sizzle, but still some good quality of life and some great investor numbers. Birmingham and Huntsville, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, Atlanta, Oklahoma City, Dallas, Houston, Indianapolis, Memphis, Kansas City, St. Louis, and the city that we're going to discuss today. These are all cities that have a low cost of living. They're the regions I call the stable markets as opposed to the volatile coastal markets. The city that we're discussing today has a low cost of living. For one, it has a fairly central location within the U.S., and another is that it is geographically positioned on a Great Lake, and it costs about 1/12 as much to move cargo over water than it does land. In fact, this city has some good bones, good infrastructure, in addition to being on both a river and a Great Lake. Now, this city used to be known as a manufacturing city, and then it saw its manufacturing decline. And a couple decades ago, it began to reinvent itself by becoming a national and world medical hub. And that is one of the best things that the city ever did for itself. And interestingly, this city is well known for its professional sports teams as well. And I am quite the sports fan and sports historian. In fact, their football team is so bad that they are correlated with futility. And it can be easy to forget that their football team was once the most dominant and feared team in the league. In fact, they won 8 pro football championships in a short period of time, but that was more than 50 years ago, which was also around the time that the city was thriving as a manufacturing hub. That was legendary football coach Paul Brown. Otto Graham was their Hall of Fame quarterback. He threw to Hall of Fame receivers, and the team later had whom many consider to be the greatest running back of all time. It has also been 70 years since their baseball team won the World Series, easily the longest drought in all of Major League Baseball. But you know what? Outside of all that passion for the city's football, baseball, and basketball teams, if people don't have jobs, they'll still move out and new people won't move in. The city could have now reached an apex point, though, a critical mass with the amount of medical and technology infrastructure that they've now built. And I grew up less than a 4-hour drive east of this Ohio city, and this area has all 4 seasons and beautiful autumns. We're talking about turnkey real estate investing today. Turnkey means all done for you. A company purchases and then extensively rehabilitates a property. Then they place a tenant in it, and then you buy it. So then they manage it and send you ongoing monthly cash flow checks. That's cash flowing turnkey property. Now, before we bring in today's guest, what's happening nationally in the turnkey real estate market and this lack of housing inventory that most markets struggle with? In a lot of cases, the property renovations are becoming even more extensive for you. You see, because some turnkey providers are having to dig down deeper to find inventory today, that means that often they'll buy a more beat up place, which means that they spend less on the purchase price when they buy it out of foreclosure or whatever, and consequently, they spend more on the rehab. And these are extensive renovations, often all CapEx and all mechanicals. CapEx means major capital expenditures like new roofs and plumbing and HVAC. So where a turnkey provider used to have to pay, say, more for a home to flip, they might have then put $20K into a rehab. Now a provider can pay less because they're buying a lesser property because they had to dig deeper to find that lesser property. And now they're putting, say, $30K into the rehab instead now to bring it up to standards. They're digging deep to the point of where they have to stop short of avoiding obsolescent structures sometimes. We're talking about real estate investing in a metro, a diamond in the Rust Belt today with our guest. Our guest was, in fact, a 10-year Rich Dad speaker before becoming a real estate provider like he is today. You'll meet him next. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. Finally, Total Control Financial gives you checkbook control of your 401k and IRA money to invest in real estate. It's time to get your retirement money into your own checking account, but you've got to avoid the little-known tax that you'll pay with any self-directed IRA. Instead, it's time for the QRP. Learn more and get a copy of the QRP book by text messaging the letters QRP to 72000. That's text QRP to 72,000. MC Laubscher is the host of the top-rated business and investing podcast, Cash Flow Ninja, and also the president of Producers Wealth. Producers Wealth assists people in creating, protecting, and perpetually multiplying wealth in any economy through creating processes that help them increase their production, provide them with liquidity, passive income generators, and opportunities for enormous growth. Learn more about their time-tested and proven systems at yourownbankingsystem.com.
Hi, this is Russell Gray, co-host of the Real Estate Guys radio show, and you're listening to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydreams.
Bryce is here with us today. We're talking about turnkey real estate investing in the Cleveland metro market. Welcome to Get Rich Education.
Thanks for having me, my friend.
Well, it's so good to have you here. You know, I think a lot of people's perception with Cleveland, Bryce, is now why would you invest in an area known as the Rust Belt of all places? I mean, Cleveland, that's a city that had its population peak more than 50 years ago, just there in the city proper. And, you know, Cleveland, at least for a while, had become a largely forgotten city with a struggling manufacturing sector, and they had a lot of job losses. So why Cleveland?
You know, it's interesting in the past decade and a half, what started to take place in the area. And when you look at a forgotten city and what can take place there, you think, gosh, yeah, Rust Belt, terrible, sports team troubles, what the world would bring somebody to a market of that nature. And years ago, things started to take a turn, and we've noticed it. And some folks that are local look at it from a different perspective when you see an industry changing, a market changing, where some of the manufacturing's coming back, but not just the manufacturing coming back, but a long-term view that individuals had that was going to take to change the city entirely. The healthcare industry has taken over. Things turning and burning back in the steel mills help tremendously when it starts to build that economic base back in place where that city was falling apart before. Now we're in a position where it's ready to grow. And when they start to take off and you're at the base of that and one of the true believers of it, it's interesting. It's interesting to see where it's been, where it's going to.
And we're not talking about a secondary or tertiary market here. Cleveland, Ohio, in metropolitan statistical area is the 30th to 35th largest in size.
Right. Over 2 million people within an hour reach of us. And, that puts us in a position to cover a ton of territory. So when you have that type of reach and population, it really puts you ahead of a lot of the other markets when we're looking at the price points that we are.
Now, before we talk about business sectors, just tell us a bit about the Cleveland culture and the attractions, just the things to do, and how Cleveland can retain people and attract new residents.
Well, being a lakefront city has done it a whole lot of good throughout the years, but one of the things that they had never done in the past was take advantage of that location. So, years ago, they started with a football stadium. The Browns are right on the lakefront, and that makes sense come December and January when you really want to freeze your opponents out. But then the centralized growth outward. So utilizing the River District and Playhouse Square District, which most folks don't realize is the second largest performing arts district in the world, second to New York City. So there's a ton of culture here, and a lot of what the population today is looking for is that type of culture that's in walking distance, that's within public transportation distance. And Cleveland has that infrastructure in place. And we're just now seeing them capitalize on a lot of these pieces. So the lakefront, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, when you talk about the entire MSA, then we start to get into Elyria and Akron and Canton, and they have the NFL Football Hall of Fame. So there's a ton that draws individuals to the area year round, regardless of the weather patterns, even though we've seen quite the warming trend, I feel. But continues to spur their interest in wanting to return, be a part of the community, in turn, living here.
Not every MSA has frontage on both a substantial river and a Great Lake. So there's a lot of potential there. And of course, you've got major pro sports teams there, the Indians, the Browns, the Cavaliers.
Absolutely. We are a big sports town. Everybody wants to back the teams, and they show up and they're very proud of what we have going on here. As an individual who's always been in that culture and environment, it's very unique to have seen the city go through some very good times, some bad times, and now they're kind of on an even keel. And I was looking at some articles recently relating our GDP to LeBron James. And we're going, okay, well, I think we're good regardless of where the man wants to play basketball. It's a business decision. But even an individual at that level who continues to have an involvement in our area just speaks just tremendous words for what happens here.
LeBron James now has really become an off and on trend in Cleveland. Whether he's liked or whether he's hated is kind of changed by year as he's changed teams. But we're talking about business and big businesses and all the companies on the Fortune 500 list in this greater region that we call Northeast Ohio. We're talking about a number of Fortune 500 companies that aren't just present there, but are headquartered there in Cleveland and in the Northeast Ohio region. And these aren't just industrial names like that Goodyear Tire and Rubber is headquartered there or that Sherwin-Williams is headquartered there. But we're talking about the headquarters of companies in other sectors like Progressive Insurance and Key Bank, which is, if not one of the tallest buildings, the Key Bank building right there in downtown Cleveland. And of course, the Cleveland Medical Clinic, among the world's best healthcare systems.
Right. There's a ton of top-notch companies here, headquartered here, Drug Mart, headquartered here. So from the top down, Cleveland is structured well to grow into the future. And when you look at that Forbes list that was just recently released, their 500 list, I think we had 8 in the MSA area. And, it's just a tremendous amount of great companies. And we'll see what happens over the next, I would say, 24 months with steel production. A lot of the mills have been churning and burning that were shut down for years. I see a lot more productivity coming out of that area, and that's fantastic.
Manufacturing is not dead there. It continues to be active. It just is not as great of a component as that MSA's economy as it used to be. So just talk to us more about the diversification of the different economic sectors, Bryce.
So moving into the healthcare industry was one of the best things that Cleveland ever did. And having Cleveland Clinic at the top of the list, which is world-renowned, they're performing miracles on a daily basis, it seems like anymore, was best step could have ever been made. And when you start to bring in all the advancements in medicine, along with that is the tech industry. Without the two of them being combined, we wouldn't see all of the tremendous steps we're seeing today. So having all of that centered here in Cleveland is tremendous benefit. And we're just now, I think, beginning into what that relationship will truly be. In the long run, medical influence, that industry and the tech industry are becoming one and the same. So as we start to see the developments in and around the hospitals that support both, and the outreach that they're creating, it's just a fantastic feeling.
We're talking about biotech, basically the confluence of the medical field and the technology field.
You got it.
In fact, Forbes gave Cleveland a distinction as one of the top cash flowing rental markets. Tell us about that.
In cash flowing real estate, we were named number 1 in Forbes Cold Market Review. So above Indianapolis, above St. Louis, above some of the other markets that stand out as high performers in what it is, our bread and butter, turnkey real estate, turnkey rentals. And I think that has to do a lot with, number 1, we have fantastic, I know it has a lot to do with the fact that we have very good property price points, great jobs, and a lot of influx, individuals wanting to live in and around the city in those price point neighborhoods that we're looking at.
Now, overall, just from a national perspective, we're seeing a shift from homeownership to renting. Tell us about how Cleveland is capitalizing on that trend.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? I was talking to an individual just the other night about the change in guard there and where individuals are more comfortable renting. And it's not a goal and a task to have home ownership checked off of that list. And one of the interesting parts about that is it's not necessarily beneficial in our market to go out and build a bunch of new properties for that purpose when there is a slew of them at our disposal that are ready to be put into turnkey rental, walk-in livable position in good neighborhoods that are close to town, close to transportation. And that's where we found a great way to start to capitalize on the movements that we're seeing in this city.
Young people and talented people and career-driven people want to be mobile because that is good for their income potential. And few things are more of an impediment to being mobile than buying and maintaining your own home.
So we find that a lot of folks are moving in, even across country, and they're picking neighborhoods, they're new to the area. And when they're making decisions, one of the best parts about the rental side of it is being upwardly mobile, where they're able to then 2 years down the road make a different decision. And we know all folks have those changing life decisions. So we get to cater to that.
I think people are smartening up about that. Paying rent is not the same as throwing money away. Well, I want to ask you more about which neighborhoods you select in a moment, but I know that your focus is in single-family turnkey rentals. Tell us about why you've chosen single-family rather than fourplexes or eightplexes or huge multifamily apartment complexes or assisted living homes or anything else. Why single-family in these Cleveland submarkets?
When you said, hey, it's not throwing money away when you're renting it, somebody wants a house, whether it's a duplex, a triplex. I was looking through some of our inventory. I was looking through 50 or so homes that we have currently, and one of them is outside of the single family bread and butter target that we have. When it comes to the neighborhoods that we're looking at, regardless of where they are in and around the city center of Cleveland, we want single family homes. Folks that are moving in that we find from bigger cities are wanting a single family. They're going, wow, I can get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home for under $1,000. Are you kidding me? $700, $800, $900. They're not used to it. So we also see that anytime we're next to a property that's multi-unit, maybe a duplex next to a single family home, those folks immediately, just this past week, I was at a property that the guys are rehabbing, and the gal comes out darn near every time and asks, when am I going to be ready to move into the new house? I don't want to be in this duplex anymore. So I've seen it good and bad. I have all of those properties, as I'm sure you do, and many of the listeners that you have do, in my own portfolio and things. But it gives a lot more flexibility in the single family world. We can refinance them easily. If it's an individual who wants to sell it at the end of the day, we can sell it to an end user. We can sell them on terms. We can, continue to cash flow them. So there are a whole lot of options there for investors at all levels. And it's one of the things that we targeted looking at single family rentals.
Now, in Cleveland, or just in general in United States metro areas, one reason one focuses on single-family homes is because they don't tend to be right in the smack dab center of the heart of downtown. Well, often if you buy something right in the center of a central business district, for one thing, the numbers don't work because it can be so desirable to live there that the purchase price that you as an investor have to pay is substantially greater than that smaller rent amount is. And the other thing is that, that place in a central business district tends to be an apartment, and people just don't live in apartments nearly as long as they do single-family residences. And you don't have single-family residences right down smack dab in the center of a city. So that's why we're often talking about what I like to call these investor advantage submarkets that are some ways out of the central business district. And just like Bryce is saying, when you're in a single-family home, it's detached. It feels like your own. Therefore, you're more likely to live there longer. And especially when in a place like the Cleveland MSA, you're only paying $700, $800, or $900 a month to live in something that feels like your own, yet you don't have all the downside responsibility that comes with it.
Right. And, the benefits of those neighborhoods that we're starting to choose in and around the city is long-term appreciation. So there we get into one of our secrets of the market and why we have started to target and grow very significantly, because the bulk of our properties are within the 5 to 7 mile range of the city center and affordable. And that's where we're starting to see a change in Cleveland's landscape. And as those neighborhoods, and it's easy to do some research and find the ones that have already changed. As those neighborhoods change, the price points skyrocket, and it's too late. So the neighborhoods that we're in are also poised for very good growth.
And how do you identify those markets? I know you sort of describe those as longer-term appreciation pockets.
Right. So, when we were discussing the areas that we target, we're not going to discriminate. It's just numbers. Suburbs work as long as the numbers are there, not only for me, but for other investors. We've got to look at it from all the aspects that are involved. But when we start to look at the neighborhoods in and around the city that were forgotten, that were around manufacturing, we're avoiding the structures that are, just obsolete. They're very difficult to turn into a functional single-family home. They may have been chopped up before. There is a district out of the 6th. I was talking to an individual, it's law enforcement the other night, and my buddy's a police officer. There's 6 districts, and one of them is a no-go zone. We just avoid it. It's still not quite there.
Yeah.
But the other 5 are where we're targeting. 2 of them still have that long-term growth, where the old abandoned properties have been torn down. New infrastructures going in everywhere, new roads, new utilities, cleaned up houses, rehabbing like crazy, and the occupancy rates are through the roof. So those are going to be your longer term 3, 5, 7-year targets where the outcome is going to be pretty substantial for the investor.
Just talk to us by the numbers. What is the typical rent, price, bedrooms, bathrooms, and square footage of these homes?
Bedrooms, bathrooms, generally always going to be right around 3.2, 3.1. We will occasionally see a little bit larger 4-bedroom, 2-bath home, anywhere from $700 to $1,000. You start to get over that in the suburbs. We do have $1,000 or $1,300 to $1,500 range properties, but they're not going to be in that general Cleveland vicinity. And there's benefits to both. We see the longer term appreciation being closer to the city center. You have very good stability and desire in the suburbs, but a higher price point. So a property that is listed, by us at say $70,000 is going to rent for typically around $900, give you somewhere around $500 to $600 in cash flow on a cash purchase. If you're leveraging it, obviously the cash flow is slightly different, but all the benefits you gain from leverage.
Now, that is a highly desirable rent to value ratio. I know that's what you're thinking out there, but the property taxes that you find there in the Cleveland MSA, they are greater than you find in some areas, but yet they're not as great as you would find in most of the Texas metros.
No, not even close to what you're looking at some of the other major markets, but we're not at the bottom of the pile. So typically we're going to see somewhere around $120 to $160 a month in taxes. But that also includes some benefits to the tenants that take a little bit of the strain off of them, trash removal in some cases. So there is an upside to that. But we get down to the brass tacks and what the tax dollars do for our infrastructure. We can't complain there, especially when the price points are low enough that put us on top within the cash flow range, even calculating in the higher tax point.
Yeah, I like to think of the property tax rate there as being close to 2%. Is based on the value of the property, you typically pay about 2% per year in property tax there. And you are a financing-friendly turnkey provider. I'm going to say a minority of them are not today, just because we are in a hot market and this is very desirable, and some providers just are not willing to wait for financing, but you are there. And importantly, you have the property management incorporated in-house as part of the same company that does your turnkey renovation. And you also have a 1-year maintenance guarantee. And importantly, you do have an annual inspection program given by your managers to your investor properties. Tell us about the guarantee and the annual inspection program.
Yeah, we guarantee any of the properties that we're going to turn over to another investor. These investments were purchased by us for us initially, and we've put ourselves in a position to offer them now to other individuals. And one of the best things we can do is stand behind that. So a year from the point of purchase really lets someone know that they're not purchasing a liability. It's truly going to be an asset. And going forward, that they're not going to be pulling out of their pocket for everyday stuff. So simple things. And when you talk about properties that are so readily occupied, meaning we purchase a property, turn it over in less than 60 to 90 days and never have an issue with occupancy because there's a waiting list for these things come up. As we get into that stabilization period, it may be a screen door, it may be a screen, but we want it to be taken care of. So there's a year maintenance guarantee. And then going forward, what we've done is we've adopted a third party. Now we perform it in-house, but it was a locale principality that actually has this inspection process. It's an international process if you look at it that way, but every year we're looking at simple things, gutters, but also the more detailed side of it, windows, door jambs, outlets, interior side of the property. Have there been any changes made? One of the things I think people miss is that folks that are living in a house will sometimes tend to make it their own. And if you don't keep up on the things that they may be doing inside of that, then someone's asset is suffering. So those programs really ensure that their assets are going to be maintained long-term and continue to cash flow for them.
Your team has a good degree of experience and involvement with the properties and that interface with the investor. Just tell us more about the ongoing communication with the investor.
So like many of the folks out there that are going to offer something similar, we have the back house side of this, but we're all integrated from the property management to the construction team to myself. running all phases of the property from purchase to construction to management. It's all in-house, which makes it very simplistic to get to the individuals you need to. And they're committed to their path, their growth, and seeing that the investors that we have on board are getting what they're looking for. So they have a great relationships with the folks. That's one of the reasons we have these events like we're having coming up in October, is to bring those folks in and new individuals that are interested in joining this market and giving them the time to network and spend some time with them and really learn who they are that they're working with.
You do have such a great degree of openness and transparency there. And part of that is the fact that you do host field trips. Like you mentioned, your next field trip there in Cleveland is coming up October 19th to 21st. So if this potentially interests you in either the field trip or just grabbing the report to go ahead and learn more, I would suggest that you do that. You can get that Cleveland Market Report at getricheducation.com/Cleveland. It's really of assistance to the provider. If you're already educated, you already have a report in your hands, and you know a bit about the metro, the team, and the types of properties that they have there, so that you can do that at getricheducation.com/Cleveland. Bryce, it's been great having you here. Thanks so much for coming out of the show.
I appreciate you having me.
If it's of interest to you, I recommend learning more about the market that's home to the Cleveland Clinic, has the fastest growing healthcare economy in the United States, and that CNBC recently ranked #1 for rental returns at getricheducation.com/Cleveland. Until next week, when I'll be back to help you build your wealth, happy investing, and don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
Ranked by Forbes as one of the fastest growing cities, Orlando, Florida has a big and diverse economy, yet still features affordable rental properties that cash flow. Our boots-on-the-ground turnkey provider, Greg Bond, wrote a special report to help you discover the amazing market of Orlando. Request your free copy today. Visit getricheducation.com/Orlando. That's getricheducation.com/Orlando.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, getricheducation.com.